be in my video? Yeah? We can pretend that I am going to be a villain in like a Bond movie or something, and I have this cat sidekick, and you can help me plan world domination. What do you think? No? No? Okay, fine. Be that way. Cats. What are you going to do? Hi. My name is Love Slave or Christine, and I own the Denver Sanctuary, which happens to be a private membership dungeon social club near downtown Denver in Colorado. And this is one of 3 videos that people can watch to get a membership to the Denver Sanctuary. And at this point in the video, I just want to point out to anyone who has been told by somebody else, you watch the videos so I don't have to, so that you'll be able to get me the membership at the door. Now is when you go get that person and say, doesn't work that way. Because after watching the videos, when you show up at the sanctuary, you have to take a test. Like literally a 25-question multiple choice test, and somebody can't take it for somebody else. So if they haven't watched the videos, they're going to fail, and they're not going to become members, and they're going to be told they have to go watch the videos again, or they have to go sit through the orientation on first or third Mondays. So if somebody's told you to watch this video for them, go get them and point out that that doesn't work that way. Alrighty? Okay, fine. This video of the series of 3 is kind of a BDSM 101 sort of thing. It's some basic information, and I just want to point out that the information that I'm going to give is mostly my personal perspective, and it's the information I think that you should have prior to attending an event at a club such as mine. It is not the definitive, it is not the end-all be-all. A lot of people might have some different opinions, and that's fine. One of the things that's great about BDSM is it can be totally different for each person. It can be their personal experience. I do suggest that if you are new to this lifestyle, that there are 3 books that you should read. Screw the Roses, Send Me the Thorns, the Topping Book, and the Bottoming Book. Doesn't matter how you think you might identify. Reading those 3 books will give you a great foundation of information about this lifestyle, so that you can understand kind of what you're getting into, and how the dynamics work a little bit. All right? So here is a little bit of my take. When you first get involved in BDSM, and if you start doing a little bit of research, you tend to find that there's a couple different philosophies about it. More often than not, you're going to hear SSC, which stands for safe, sane, and consensual. What that means in a nutshell is we try to be as safe as we can in the way that we engage in our BDSM activities. We try to be sane in the way that we deal with our relationships, and most importantly, consent is involved between both parties at all times. Now, by safe, that means that we spend some time educating ourselves how to use the tools of the trade. We don't just grab somebody and stand them in front of us and say, here, let me try to hit you with this whip thing. Oh, I'm sorry, did you need that ear? We're not trying to put people in the hospital. We're not trying to hurt them to a point that they don't want to be hurt at. So we want to teach ourselves or find a mentor or go slow and learn how to actually use the tools of the trade so that we can be safe with them while we're using them. Sane. Now, I personally think that if you were to ask the overwhelming general population if the activities that people engage in BDSM are sane activities, they're probably going to say no. But what I mean as far as sane, when in safe, sane, and consensual, is that we're not using BDSM as a means to psychologically or emotionally harm somebody. It is not to beat them down and make them feel less of themselves. If anything, if it is done right, it builds somebody up. And quite honestly, if you fuck with somebody's brain enough that you put them in the psycho ward, you can't play with them anymore. And at that point, you've broken one of our basic rules, which is don't break your toys, especially the human ones. So you want to keep your partner's sanity in check, okay? Most important part of SSC is consent. Nothing, absolutely nothing should be happening between 2 adults who are engaging in these types of activities unless everything has been agreed upon by both parties. Both parties, okay? So that is important. Now, when it comes to SSC, safe, sane, and consensual, there are some people, when this first theory or tenet came out, people were like, yeah, that's it. We're safe, we're sane, we're consensual. And then there are other people that kind of sat back and thought about it and went, not so much. So the other philosophy that you'll hear quite often is RAC, which stands for Risk Aware Consensual Kink. What we are doing is risky. We are aware of those risks, yet we are still consensual kinky. Again, consent being the important part. Now, I have been asked over the years, the sanctuary has been open since March of 2006, so we've been around a little while. I've been asked over the years whether the sanctuary is SSC or RAC. And I've never quite understood that question, because as far as I'm concerned, I think whether somebody believes in the SSC or RAC is kind of a personal thing, and a lot of it depends on the level at which you engage in BDSM activities, because there is no flat out rule that says in order to be considered kinkier in BDSM you must do this and do this often and do it with this many people, and there's no rules like that. You know, you can do anything at any time, or as much or as little, or anything like that. And there are some elements of BDSM that have less of a risk factor. You know, in the early days was an extremely heavy bottom, a heavy masochist. And so my level of play was a little riskier than, let's say, somebody whose involvement is more like a role play, whether they're littles or they're ponies or puppy play or, you know, something like that. There might be some less risk in those sorts of things. So I think it's less a factor of, you know, is the sanctuary SSC based or RAC based? I'll tell you what the sanctuary is. The sanctuary is responsibility based, which means I expect every adult who is walking into my club and participating in activities there is going to do so as an adult, which means they're going to negotiate well, they're going to use their safe words, they're going to be respectful of the club rules and respectful of everybody else who's there. And I'm going to go over negotiations and safe words in this video. So I'm less specifically based whether it's the philosophies based, and more just I expect people to behave like grown-up adults and not middle school children when they come to the club. What does BDSM actually stand for? Bondage, discipline, sadomasochism. Sometimes people throw in their dominance and submission. Bondage is physically restraining somebody using anything your little old brains can come up with, whether it's handcuffs or saran wrap or rope, or my favorite is like torn up bed sheets, just when you're in the heat of the moment and you gotta have something to tie your hands to the bed. Something that restricts somebody's movement, and it doesn't have to be the entire body, it can just be, you know, part of somebody's body. There are a number of rope groups in the Denver area. There's Denver Bound, there's also Denver Rope Bite, who meet at the sanctuary as well as other locations. There are rope practices at the sanctuary, also at the rack room. So rope is kind of a very popular thing, and it's really kind of neat. So bondage and restriction and, you know, that sort of stuff. So physically restraining somebody using pretty much anything your hands, brain can come up with is bondage. Discipline is a way of controlling somebody's behaviors by using a system of rewards and punishment to kind of have consequences for their actions. So somebody knows that the consequences for their actions is they either get reward or they get punished. And discipline in BDSM is really not that much different than, let's say, discipline of a child. And there's a couple of things that are important to know for discipline to work in BDSM. For discipline to work, it is very important that the person who is in charge of the disciplining is very clear as to what their expectations are. They say, this is what I expect, in very clear language. They also need to say exactly what the rewards will be and what the punishments will be. And they have to be very specific about that. And then most importantly, they have to follow through. They have to follow through with those rewards, and they have to follow through with those punishments. And why I am stressing that you have to be very clear on these is because it really is not cool for a dominant or a master to say, oh, you will be punished, and then have the person go, oh, well, that's for me to know and you to find out. Because then we have a possible consent problem. I knew a couple once, were engaged, ready to get married. I'd been invited to the wedding, and then a few weeks before the wedding, the submissive let me know that the wedding was off. And the reason the wedding was off is because she had not completed something that needed to be done in time for the wedding, and her master physically punished her. And he punished her out of anger, and he punished her in a manner that they had never actually discussed, and was physically brutal. And he, of course, said, well, I'm your master. I can physically punish you any way you want. And she said, okay, fine, then we're not getting married, and it ended the relationship. And the reality is, no, it is not okay for a dominant or a master to basically justify assault or physical beating that has not been consented. And yes, I understand, and you can debate with me all day about 24/7 consent. But if you have 24/7 type relationship, then there should have been a consent to a level of physical punishment that's allowed. So if you're going to do something that involves discipline, and it is a great tool, it's an amazing tool. It can be really a wonderful thing to have discipline if it is done well. If it is done wrong, it can very quickly cross from a BDSM activity to an assault or an illegal activity, a criminal activity. So I just wanted to stress that as far as discipline goes. So that's bondage, discipline, sadomasochism. So a sadist is somebody who enjoys inflicting pain on others. I love sadists. Yeah, I do. And there are different types of sadists out there. And it doesn't matter what kind of a sadist you might find yourself to be. You might even not think you're a sadist until you kind of get into this and then realize that it's kind of fun. There are those people who really honestly and truly enjoy inflicting pain on others. Unfortunately, the true sadists in the world are the ones that we might see about in the newspapers or read about in history, like our serial killers like Jeffrey Dahmer or Eileen Wuornos, or these sorts of things. However, it's important to know that those people that we usually see in the news did not get consent from their victims. Okay, not BDSM, no consent. All right. In the world of BDSM, there are those who truly enjoy inflicting pain on their bottoms or their submissives or their slaves or whatever. And to them, woohoo! As long as they're getting consent, everything is fine. Then there are other people who are sadists, not so much because they get off on it, but because they know that the person that they are inflicting pain on, that is what that person wants, needs, and desires. So it is more for a mutual arrangement than it is for just self-serving sort of thing. So there are some people that might not enjoy dishing out a lot of pain to somebody, or maybe they do it because it needs to be a punishment, or they do it, like I said, because they know the person gets off on it. That's how they function and that sort of thing. And it honestly doesn't matter what kind of a sadist you are, as long as the person you're playing with knows what kind of a sadist you are. Because if you are truly the kind of sadist who really just likes inflicting pain on others, you're not going to care so much about what they want. And they need to be able to know that you're going to do whatever you want, or within these confines. You're going to use these toys, until you call red. And then with someone who is less of a strict sadist, more of a sensual sadist, or a sadist who's really working for a power dynamic between the two, they're going to be someone that you negotiate more with about what types of toys you like, whether you like sting, whether you like thud, that kind of thing. So again, it doesn't matter what kind of a sadist you might think you are or identify as long as you really are open with the person you're playing with about what your expectations are. A masochist is somebody who enjoys receiving pain. And I'm going to get my coffee because not having my coffee is causing me pain right now. Like I said, a masochist is somebody who enjoys receiving pain. Hello! That would kind of be me, to some extent. However, it really is in certain circumstances and controlled situations. Let me tell you. I was kinky before I really knew what BDSM was. I liked being restrained during sex and, this kind of thing. I really wasn't into pain. And I have 2 children. One is in her 20s and the other is 11, 12. And when I had my daughter, I wasn't in the lifestyle. But I had been in the lifestyle for a few years when I was pregnant with my son. And I foolishly thought, childbirth is going to be a piece of cake this time around because, I am a pain slut and I know how to manage my pain. And so this whole childbirth thing is just going to be fabulous. Fuck no. Okay? Being a masochist does not necessarily help you with childbirth. And I tried. I tried for Denver Health to let me use my newfound skills in pain management as a pain slut. But no, they would not let me hang from the top of the bed with suspension cuffs because apparently that gets in the way of IVs. And they wouldn't let, somebody stand over in the corner and crack a whip because that's just such a wonderful sound and it puts me in such a headspace. And I even when I went to my pain management class, I asked the woman, I said, so, I kind of like fisting. I kind of like it a lot. So, when we're getting ready for the birth, could I get fisted? Because wouldn't that stretch everything out, down there? Or does it? No, because you don't want to hit the baby's head if you're going too far. And this woman looked at me like I was just absolutely wacko. And then she even said to me, she says, I thought you said that the baby's daddy is, like, not in the picture anymore. And I said, well, he's not. But I got friends. Needless to say, the pain management class did not go well with Denver Health. Thank you very much. So a masochist is somebody who enjoys receiving pain, but it is certain circumstances and a controlled situation. I don't like stubbing my toe, okay? I don't like plucking my eyebrows, obviously. But you come after me with a flogger or, that sort of stuff, and I can be a very, very, very happy camper with that kind of stuff. So, they went away. Anywho, so it is in certain circumstances and controlled situations. Now, I am going to take just a moment and explain to you because when I went to my first party, I could not understand why anybody would want to get hit with anything. That was not, I just didn't grasp that at all. So, your body's natural response and reaction to pain is to start producing adrenalines and endorphins. It's kind of like nature's own pain relieving system. Some people are familiar with the concept of a runner's high. People who do marathon type sports, whether it's marathon running or that sort of stuff. What happens is you exert your muscles in your legs so much, or you exert your muscles so much that they build up a lot of extra lactic acid, and the body trying to absorb all that extra lactic acid is painful. So when you got a runner running a marathon or doing some kind of a triathlon or some really enduring physical, work, it gets to a point where it's really painful. And when that happens, the body responds by pushing out a whole bunch of adrenalines and endorphins, and it kind of releases the pain, but it sort of also gives you a euphoric, a kind of a high so that you can continue to do what it is that you need to do. There are people who love to ride, roller coasters. They're adrenaline junkies or stuff where you hear about feats in, emergency situations where you have a couple of guys who have to rescue a child who's pinned under a car, and they roar, they lift the car. These are all kinds of a natural response to the body being inflicted with pain. And let's say you've broken your arm or you have fallen or something, and a lot of times your body's going to flood you with endorphins and adrenaline so that you can do what's necessary to kind of fix what's causing the pain, to stop it. It'll give you, you start getting adrenalines and endorphins when you get a pain in your stomach so that you can try to get to the hospital before your appendix bursts. So it's kind of meant to be a life-saving sort of thing. So when it comes to BDSM activities, what masochists are doing is they are intentionally having pain inflicted to release that adrenaline and that endorphin rush to kind of give them that euphoric high, to kind of put them in what we call subspace, this kind of alternate la-la land. And I'll tell you, when I first went to my play party and I watched all that was going on, and I was kind of like, I don't think so, and somebody explained it to me, I was kind of like, yeah, whatever. And then I read about it and, Screw the Roses, Send Me the Thorns. And I had met somebody who I had coffee with. In fact, he's the one who told me, read Screw the Roses, Send Me the Thorns. And so after, a couple of weeks, I said to him, I said, I was a psych major in college, and I'm not sure I buy into all of this subspace adrenaline endorphin rush type thing. I said, can you show me? And he did. We played, and he used a big, beautiful flogger called Black Beauty, and and you don't even realize it. You kind of slip into this la-la land and sort of stuff. So it happens. And it can be better than any drug that you have to actually pay for. And you don't get necessarily hungover the next day from it. You can get dropping from it. You can kind of, you get all this adrenaline high, and then the pendulum kind of swings, and so you might be a little, but it's not as detrimental to your health as heroin or coke. Yeah. So anyway, masochists, that's why masochists do what they do. And why they seek that sort of stuff out. Now, some masochists, kind of like sadists, may not be masochists, but they will accept pain as punishment if they realize they've misbehaved with their master or their dominant or whatever. Some of them, back in the day, less so much. If you were in a master-slave relationship, you really did give yourself over to that master, and if they enjoyed, inflicting pain on somebody, even if you weren't into pain, you would agree to that because you wanted to please your master. So there are different reasons why people are masochists, and some people are very light masochists, and some people are very firm masochists, and it doesn't matter what you do, and it doesn't matter if you're a masochist at all. There are plenty of forms of play that go on in the dungeon that don't involve pain at all. We talked about bondage. Shibari rope bondage and that sort of stuff does not have to be about pain. It can be about the rope work. It can be about the artistic endeavors of the rope work. Once you tie somebody up, you don't have to beat them. It's fun, but you don't have to. The goal itself can be just to suspend somebody in rope. It doesn't have to be painful. In fact, a lot of times in bondage, you really don't want them to be in pain because then they can't get suspended or pulled up or stay very long, and that sort of stuff. So you don't even have to be a masochist to do all of that. Okay, so those are the difference between a sadist and a masochist. A sadist is someone who inflicts pain, and a masochist is someone who likes to receive pain in certain circumstances. Dominance and submission. Dominance is when someone accepts control over someone else to whatever degree has been agreed upon by both parties or all parties involved. And submission is when somebody gives up control to somebody else, again, to whatever degree has been agreed upon by both parties. And the whole basis of everything that we do in BDSM is about this power exchange between two individuals, the giving and accepting of responsibility or control over between two people. And like I said, it doesn't have to be about pain. It can be about service. It can be about sexual control. Yes, it can be about different forms of play. It can, have a whole negotiated range of a relationship, whether it's just two casual people who are meeting, and I hate to use the term casual because I don't think that anything that we do in this lifestyle is casual. People ask me all the time. They want to come to the club the very, very first time and meet somebody and talk to them for 10 minutes and go into the dungeon and play. And I used to do it. When I first got involved, I would play with just about anybody and everybody. That's not the best way to do it. You really do need to try to get to know somebody, and you really need to discuss all the important things before you go play with somebody. But people are always so anxious. They want to do it, and they want to do it now, and they want to do it tonight. But there has to be this exchange of power between two people. That is the basis. Even if it's between a puppy and his handler, or somebody who's getting tied up and the person tying them up. There is this shift in dynamic, and one person is in control of the situation. If it's been negotiated well, then yes, they are truly in control. The power exchange is... Okay, I totally forgot my train of thought there. But so the power exchange is the basis of all we do on this sort of stuff. So who is doing all of this exchanging of power between people? On the one hand, you have tops, dominants, masters, mistresses, and if you're on FetLife, there are a million other type terms that people have come up with now, and I don't know what any of them mean. I think people are just pulling them out of their ass and making them up. But either way, I'm just going to cover tops, dominants, and masters and mistresses. These are the people who are in control, in charge, making the rules, that sort of stuff. And on the other hand, you have bottom submissives and slaves. And these are the people who are on the receiving end. They're the people who are giving up control. They're being told what to do, being hung on the cross, that kind of thing. And there's differences between all of these. I'll explain them now. If you happen to see on FetLife, and if you're not familiar with FetLife, FetLife.com, it is basically Facebook for kinky folks. You can set up a profile. There are groups. You can read information. But it's there's just as much crap and bullshit on FetLife as there is on Facebook, so I'm warning you now. But it can be a wealth of information. So if you want to check it out. But people, they have all these terms that people can say who they are or how they identify. And it's kind of a little crazy. Anyway, so tops, dominants, masters, and mistresses. I tend to see a top as less of a who and more of a what. It is the person who is in control, in charge, telling somebody what to do. However, they don't necessarily have a very, not tight, but their relationship structure with the people that they play with is not a strong bond. It's more casual, for lack of any other term. They're not in a committed, it's a commitment factors. There you go. They're not really necessarily in a real committed relationship with this person that they're playing with, but they are taking control for usually a short period of time to just play in the dungeon. And they've negotiated what's allowable and not allowable, kind of thing. And so they don't have as much of a commitment factor. There's less of an exchange of power between the two. It's just about that time of play at the dungeon or at their house or whatever. Dominants tend to look for a little bit more of a commitment and a bond between the people that they're playing with. They might collar somebody. It might be a girlfriend or a boyfriend or a husband or a wife or a significant other who is their submissive. And there's a little more of a power exchange involved in what they're doing, and there's more emotional connection and commitment involved between a dominant and the person that they're playing with, their submissive. And then you have masters, and masters are people who are willing to accept the greatest responsibility over another person. Sometimes, especially when people are new and they're coming into this lifestyle, they say, "Ha ha, I am a master," because they will do everything that I tell them to do. And that's not the case at all, because one, a master, it goes both ways. A master-slave relationship is really not a one-way street. And when somebody comes in thinking that a master is a one-way street, it doesn't work. It's like on FetLife, I will see little 20-year-olds, I am Master Pain-A-Lot, ha ha ha. And I'm like, oh, no, you're not. Also, the term master also denotes that you have a certain level of skill and experience. And you just cannot walk into this lifestyle with no skill or experience and call yourself a master. You have to educate yourself. You have to learn. And most likely you really need to be mentored. You need to find another master so that you can learn how to negotiate the relationships. There's a meeting once a month at the sanctuary right now, MSDS. It's on fourth Mondays. There's a group called Masters and Slaves Together. They have chapters in the Colorado area. Find one of them. If you really want to be in the most extreme power exchange relationship, which is a master-slave relationship, if you want to be a master, you need to put the time in before you can say that you're a master. And the other thing is, it's okay to say that you are a master with one person, but you should never expect other people to refer to you as the term master, because they're not your master, and you can come across as a pompous, arrogant asshole if you walk around, I am master so-and-so. You know, I had somebody who came to the sanctuary many years ago, had called me up and said, oh, I just moved here from, you know, Chicago, and in Chicago I was in this club and this club and this club, and I educated, and I was like, okay, fine, come to the club. And he came to the club, and at one point I passed him in the doorway and said, are you having a good evening, sir? And he was like, oh, that's master to you. No, it wasn't. And I told him so. I said, I'm sorry, I don't know you from Adam, and the only person that I call master is my master, who happened to have been there that night. And I'm pretty sure that I was not given permission to call this other guy master. Now, you will notice that there are some people in the community that pretty much everybody will refer to as master this or master that, whether it's Master Trent or Master Gray, Master Shadow. And that is because these people have been around long enough that their knowledge, their experience, as well as their contributions and commitment to the community are recognized. And so they can get away with being referred to as master in public, or you will hear other people refer to them as master in public. And at that point, it's an honorific because they've earned it. But to introduce yourself to other people as master so-and-so and expect them to call you that, you're being an asshat. So just kind of keep that in mind. So then I've had people say, well, how am I supposed to explain my relationship if I'm introducing myself with somebody else and I want them to know that we have a master-slave relationship? And I said, well, in that case, you can just say, this is my slave, Dina, and I am her master, Tom. You know, there are ways of doing that without introducing yourself. I am master so-and-so. So yes, there are ways of doing that. So to go back to the actual being a master, people who are masters expect the greatest power exchange in their relationships with their slaves. Very often, these are dictated by a contract, and a contract is an amazing relationship tool. I think every marriage outside of BDSM should have a contract like this, because what a master-slave contract does is it specifically states and outlines what the expectations are for both people in the relationship. It's where the master is saying, as your master, I expect this, I will do this, and as my slave, you are expected to do this, and these are the expectations, and as my slave, you can expect that I will do this for you. So it is it's a living document. It is not something that you do once and then you just shove in a closet somewhere. Because the reality is we are all adults, and even though you might be in a master-slave or even a dominant-submissive relationship, the reality is we still all have to be grown-ups in the world. We still have to have jobs. We have to take care of our children. We have to have responsibilities and pay the bills and, you know, all of this, you know, kind of stuff. And sometimes things change in life. So a contract is a great way to sit down together and negotiate how the relationship is supposed to work. But you need to set time where you revisit that contract. And you can, if you're in a newer relationship, you might want to set it every 3 months. If it's, you know, you get older and you get settled into it, it could be every 6 months or every year or something like that. But it is something that needs to be done, because a lot of times when you're in a master-slave relationship, it can be fun to say something like, as my slave, you must always answer the cell phone when I call you. And that's great, unless you get a job where answering the cell phone at work could cost you your job. Because I actually that's a scenario that happened. There was a slave who really was supposed to answer the phone every time her master called, and he was calling 3 or 4 times during the day while she was at work, and she got reprimanded for it, and she was all afraid about talking to her dominant about it. And I had to tell her, look, it's your job. You don't want to lose your job. You need to be able to tell your master that he can't be calling you at work, or that you need to be able to turn your phone off so that you can do your job and not lose your job. So, you need to be able to renegotiate and visit those contracts every once in a while. And it just means that this person, a master, is willing to accept the most responsibility over someone else, the greatest power exchange basis. So those are tops, dominants, and masters and mistresses, and their varying degrees. The main difference kind of between those three topics has mostly to do with the level of commitment and emotional investment that they have with the people that they're engaged in play with. So on the other hand, you have bottoms, submissives, and slaves. And again, a bottom is kind of less of a who and a more of a what. It might be, somebody who doesn't have a partner, but they still want to experience stuff. They just need to get beat for, whatever reason, catharsis, or because they like to play or whatever. So you might negotiate to play with somebody on a casual level. You're not looking for a committed level. And there's also the case too, and this goes for both sides, for either a top or a bottom, is sometimes you have couples and they're both tops. Or you have couples and they're both bottoms. So they don't necessarily play with each other. So they're going to go play with other folks, but it's not a commitment. They already have a committed relationship, sort of thing. And a lot of times when you're new and you really don't know what you like and what you don't like, and you don't even know necessarily if you like to give or receive or whatever, a lot of times when you're new, you might identify as a top or a bottom while you're gaining the skills and still testing the water and figuring out what is this in this lifestyle that I like or don't like. So that's a bottom type person. And there are times when you might see somebody who is a dominant or a master, and you walk into the dungeon and all of a sudden they're a bottom, and something kind of goes off in your brain like, what the hell? It could very possibly be that dominant or that master is wanting to experience the feel of something as they're learning it. Maybe before somebody uses a violent wand on somebody else, they want to know what it feels like. So it gives them a little more idea of what they're handling and how to control their toys. We go back to the whole safe, sane, and consensual thing. Some dominants and masters view part of that safety training as they have it done to them, or they need to understand how it feels like. So just because you might see somebody bottoming who normally is a dominant or master doesn't make them any less of a dominant or a master. It just means that they're trying something new. Or it could be that, fire cupping does great to relieve tension, and so does a really good flogging. That sort of thing. So, that might be another reason why somebody bottoms. A submissive, kind of like a dominant, is somebody who is looking for a little bit more of a power exchange basis. They're looking for a little more meat to the relationship that they have with the people that they play with. They might be more invested in a little bit more service to them. They might help set up the scene more, and when the scene is over, they may help a little bit more in taking care of the dominant or the, after that, kind of thing. One thing I want to note about submissives is that a lot of people who identify as submissives are not necessarily submissive personality types. I can tell you right now, I've got 2 kids. I'm a single parent. I own, a dungeon, and I own theaters. I produce, I direct. For the most part, my personality is a really bossy bitch. I am the head bottom in charge of the Denver Sanctuary. And when it comes to BDSM, though, I have very strong submissive tendencies, even though I'm very much a strong personality. I have a very strong need or urge to take care of people and to serve people, and I love being in a position of service. And I'm not in a relationship with anybody right now, just because it's kind of impossible given all the shit that's on my plate. But when I am in a relationship with somebody, that's what I crave, and I sort of fill that need by trying to take care of my members of the club and my kid and my audiences at the theater. So I sort of fulfill it in a different way. But very often you'll find a lot of people who identify as submissives have very strong personality types. When it comes to dominance, you very often find that dominants have dominant personality types. No brainer. They have dominant roles in their lives. They have dominant roles in their jobs. They usually have more of a dominant role in their relationship structures, that sort of thing. But very often submissives also have very strong personality types. And then you also have slaves. And just like how masters are looking for the strongest sense of a power exchange, people who identify as slaves means that they are willing to give up the highest level of control to somebody else. To whatever degree is agreed upon. It is still negotiated and agreed upon in a contract or in a discussion, and that sort of thing. And I want to make sure that people don't think of slaves as doormats, because they're not. 90% of the time, if somebody identifies as a slave and they're with a master, there are a shit ton of responsibilities that go along with that collar that they're wearing or the title of being a slave. You know, and when you go back to, you know, the whole notion of a power exchange to begin with, someone who has a doormat personality, and there are some out there, there's not a whole lot of power exchanging going on. There's not a whole lot of them to give up. You know, there are some people that, you know, talk about the notion that, you know, the stronger a slave or submissive is, the greater the gift in the power exchange, the greater the gift of submission that they're giving. And I don't necessarily believe in that. I think that anybody gives up control to somebody else is a gift of some kind. It's a way of showing I believe in you and I trust in you and I'm giving you control over me for a period of time. So slaves are people who are willing just to give up that highest level of control to somebody else. I can tell you I've been in a master-slave relationship, and I love it when I can be in slave mode, because as I said, I am busy. I got kids and I got businesses and I got all this going on. Yet when I'm in slave mode, I don't have to worry about a fucking thing. Okay? I just have to do what my master tells me to do. And it's like all the responsibilities and weights are taken off my shoulders when he is in control or he is in charge of what we were doing for the evening. So there is something almost, in my case, or in you know, a number of slaves' cases, or you know, something. I'm not going to talk about all slaves because everybody's different. But in my case, it was almost a sense of freedom because I was able to put away all the stuff that I normally have to worry about and had different responsibilities that was more just in tune to serving my master in one person. And it's a great dynamic in a relationship to be in, and if you can get into one. But they're a lot of work. So I'm not in one now. They are a lot of work. So don't ever think of submissives or slaves as doorstops, because they're not, or doormats, because they're not. So that's bottom submissives and slaves. And you do also have people called switches. Now, switches are people who can identify as either. They sort of play both sides of the fence. And some people just call them greedy motherfuckers because they like to play on, you know, they like to get beat one week and then they like to, you know, be the beating the next week. And there's some people that do both in the same night. And it's, again, it's fine. I am really strongly a bottom and a submissive, and I have a slave heart. And I don't really have any want, need, or desire in my dungeon to top or control anybody, because I do enough of that outside with my theater and, you know, everything else. However, I've been doing this long enough that if I had to, I could probably flog somebody. And I love setting people on fire. Fire, fire, fire. Yeah, we set people on fire for fun. Fire play is one of my favorite forms of play, and I, you know, taught basic classes in it, you know. You know, so, but I don't identify as a switch. It's just I have a couple of things that I could be very toppy at. And there are people that identify as service tops, meaning they are bottoms or submissives, but again, they've been around for so long that they've picked up some skills of maybe their favorite forms of play, and then they will do those on other people, you know, as a form of service almost to these other people. So that's kind of a service top kind of mode. You know, so switches play both sides of the fence, and I used to know somebody who was a master, had a slave, yet she was a slave to another master. And it worked for them for a while, you know. I mean, if you can handle it, you know, whatever you want to do. There is no really hard and fast rule about anything to do with BDSM, provided you consent to it and it's what you want. You can do as much or as little, and it's great that you can pick and choose what works for you and what doesn't work for you. So there is no steadfast, it must be, other than it must be consensual. There are very few little must-be's, okay? So now we're going to discuss negotiations, limits, and safe words, which I've kind of thrown the terms in there, so now you can kind of think about what I was saying. Negotiations is the term that we use where adults are discussing and cussing what can and can't happen within the confines of any type of a BDSM relationship. And it doesn't matter whether that means you are negotiating to play in the dungeon for a couple hours, or you're negotiating more of a long-term relationship like a dominant and a submissive, or whether you're negotiating a contract between a master and a slave. It's where you are saying this is what's allowed to happen and this is what's not allowed to happen. This is what the expectations are, and this is what we plan to do as far as the relationship goes. And when you're new, you really suck at negotiations. And I'm not saying that to be mean. I'm saying that because when you're new, you don't even know what questions to ask. You don't even know what activities are included in this huge umbrella that we call BDSM and kink. And so I'll tell you right now, you will make mistakes when it comes to negotiating. I'm going to try to cover the little bits and pieces that I think are really important, but for the most part, you're going to fuck it up at least once. What you have to remember is that we're humans. Communication skills is not our forte, really. It's not. Because we're human, we really don't communicate well with one another. It's a problem. And communication is necessary. It is absolutely necessary in any type of a BDSM relationships. You have got to be open and honest in your communications with somebody else, especially when you're negotiating. Now, if you go on to, Google or something like that, and just Google BDSM limit lists or, something like that, there are these lists out there of all these kink activities, BDSM activities. Some of them will have 150 activities. Some will have 75 activities. Some of them will have 1,000,000 activities. And it's just this list of all these things we do in BDSM, and you're supposed to mark whether you've done it or not. And if you have done it on a scale of 1 to 5, did you like it or not like it? Would you do it again or not do it again? And I tell you, 15 years ago when I filled out one of these lists, I looked at this list and there was a whole lot of yes, no, maybe. The fuck is that? Oh, hell no, hell no, hell no. There was a lot of that going on. Now I just kind of use a limit list as a checklist of shit that I haven't done yet. It's a great communication tool. Just like a contract, a master-slave contract is a communication tool and a relationship tool. So is a limit list. So you might want to go find one and read through it and then go on FetLife and see if you can find out what half this shit is. So that you kind of know what's going on and you can discuss this when you are talking about playing with somebody. It is most important, especially when you're new. It is fine. And in fact, I encourage you to start small. Okay, you don't need to do a whole lot. So if you're curious about this and you come to the club, or even if you're a couple and you're doing it, you don't have to do all of it at once. You can do a little bit of it. And I strongly suggest you do. You negotiate with somebody and you make it very limited. You say, okay, we're gonna try these 4 things. And that's it. I'm going to allow you to restrain me. I'm going to allow you to use a flogger and a cane, and I'm going to let you blindfold me. So that's it. You can be because you can always do more later. And it is very easy, like I mentioned before about the adrenalines and the endorphins. It's very easy for those to kick in and you not even realize it. So it's best to go slow because you can always go faster later. Because once you start a scene, you should not renegotiate. There should be no more continual negotiations once the scene has started. Things need to be laid out beforehand. Now, during a scene, there does have to be a way to communicate during the scene. And yes, you can just talk with one another, but we have something called safe words, which is what people use very specifically to be able to communicate during a scene to let people know how it's going quickly and easily. The universal safe words that are recognized at the sanctuary and pretty much at any type of a public type setting like this, whether it's, you know, a dungeon party or at someone's house even, or at another location, whatever, red, yellow, and green are pretty much universally recognized and known. You can have your own personal, you know, safe words that you use at home, which is perfectly fine. But the safe words that you use in a dungeon are not only meant to communicate with the person you're playing with, it's meant to be able to communicate with other people there or staff as a safety thing. Because if you call a safe word in a dungeon like mine and it's not respected, somebody will get a dungeon monitor or staff to help you. You know, and that's, you know, one of the kind of safety reasons why it's always good to play first with somebody at some place like the sanctuary, where there are kind of some safety nets put in, rather than meeting somebody you don't know at a hotel room or at their house, or letting them come to your house. There's always a bit of danger in that. So the sanctuary does provide a little bit more of a safer option for playing with new people. So red, yellow, and green. Green is basically saying everything is just great, keep going. All right? Yellow is a way to say something needs to be changed or altered so the scene may continue. You don't want it to stop, but it could be that, you know, you have been playing for a long time now and you really need a drink of water. You've been yelling a lot and you need a drink of water. Or you've been playing for a while and been pulling on the restraints so much that your hands are going numb. And maybe you need to have the restraints loosened or changed or taken down or whatever. Or it could be something like, you know what, you've been beating on my ass for an hour. Can you turn me around and work on my tits for a bit? You know, or it could be, you know, what you're doing is okay, but now you're getting just a little bit too far. Can you, you know, take it back a little bit? You know, not be so severe with it, or not hit quite so hard with it, or maybe that spot's becoming a hot spot. You know, so you need to be able to communicate this to the person you're playing. So you call a yellow and say, hey, can you fix this or do what else is wrong? And it's not just the bottom or the submissive or the slave that can call yellow. A top can call a yellow too, because sometimes the top or the dominant or the person swinging the flog, or maybe, quite honestly, they have to pee. You know, so they might lean in and go, yellow, be back in a moment. You know, and then have a DM keep an eye on your girl. You should never leave anybody at a station unattended. It could be yellow and you have to go to the freezer and get an aluminum baseball bat that you're going to use for the next part of your scene. You could need to call a yellow because maybe it's a busy night at the dungeon and some people are getting too close to your scene. And even though you've asked them nicely once to step back, they're not stepping back. So you need to go get a dungeon monitor to tell these people to get the fuck out of your scene space. You know, so a dominant or a top can also use yellow. Safe words are for everybody. Red means scene over, done. And it does not matter why somebody calls red. It doesn't matter at all. It could be that you're done. You've been playing for an hour and a half and you're just done. It could be that, you know, you red, screw the roses, send me the thorns. It could be that you saw that whole 50 Shades of Grey shit and you thought, oh, well, this is going to be really cool. You know, and you get into the dungeon though, and you know, all of a sudden you're naked and you're up on a cross and you realize I'm naked on a cross in front of a whole bunch of strangers that I don't know. And ow, hey, that fucking hurts. That hurts. I didn't think it was going to hurt. Ow, that much. Okay, maybe I'll like it. Maybe I'll like it. No, you know, if you just don't like it, call red. Okay? It could be that maybe you've been really looking forward to this scene. You've been planning it for weeks or months or whatever. But here it is Saturday night and you're at the club and you want to do this scene, but god damn it, on Wednesday you lost your job and on Thursday the muffler of your car fell off right on I-25 during rush hour traffic, and on Friday the new cat that you brought home, you know, clawed to death your nice leather couch, and here it is on Saturday and you really want to do this scene but you can't focus on the scene. Now,
I'll tell you personally, one of the reasons I like to play as a masochist is it gets me what I call out of my head. It gets me to kind of forget all the shit and the stressors that cause it. However, sometimes you can't get away from that. You can't get away from whatever's bugging you during the week, or there's something going on. And again, like I said, because scenes are for tops and bottoms, if you are a top and you cannot give 100% attention to the person that you're playing with, for whatever reason, maybe it's you're feeling sick, or maybe you've had a stressful week, or maybe the music in the dungeon tonight is just not cutting it for you, or there's another scene going on that's a distraction because it's beyond what you are normally capable of. Somebody's over there using a metal grinder and sparking in, who knows. If you can't focus on the scene, call red. You're not doing yourself or your partner any favors, and you're not probably going to enjoy it. And once you call red at the sanctuary, you're done for the night. That does not mean all you dominants, or if you're a dominant, if they call red, that doesn't mean you talk to them for 10 or 15 minutes and talk them into resuming the scene or playing more. If somebody calls red, the scene is over, done, kaput. And if somebody's calling red and it's not respected, my DM will step in and end the scene and take the submissive away from the dominant who doesn't seem to be able to respect safe words. Which is why I was saying that if you have a personal safe word and your safe word is watermelon and you're on the cross screaming watermelon, 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 my DMs are not going to think that that's a safe word. They're just going to think you're hungry and you like watermelon. So, safe words are important. They should be used by both persons. Also, a dominant or a top, a lot of times it's good to tell a submissive or whoever you're being with if you have determined, and very often you might have to. You don't always scene until somebody calls a safe word. I can tell you I rarely ever call a safe word. I will pass out before I call a safe word. And that's not because I'm badass or that sort of stuff. It's just that I play to that extreme. I don't think to call red unless there truly is something wrong. I've called red before, but it's just not how my brain is wired to go. So very often it's up to the dominant to determine when the scene is over, and so they can just come up to the person they're playing with and go, red, we're done, because they'll kind of register the red in their brain. Something to keep in mind is that words like no, stop, you goddamn motherfucking sadistic motherfucker, sir, these are not safe words. And in a lot of the discussion in recent years about consent and this sort of stuff, there have been discussions about whether or not the word no needs to be allowed in the dungeon as no. And I do not. You can say no in negotiations. You can say no before a scene starts as to what is allowed to happen and not happen. When you're new, it takes some training, but we need to have a separate set of communication words in a scene, because I can tell you right now, I will say no and I will say stop, motherfucker, and it becomes fun. It's part of the scene. It's part of your lexicon. But you train your brain to say the safe words when you truly want to end the scene, and that's important. Have I played scenes where they were in arena? Yes, there was somebody that one of the first people I played with, we were having this really hot scene, and halfway through the scene he goes, oh, may I use a blade on you? And I'm in fucking La La Land, and I went, sure. And he took this knife out and he scratched this wonderful little, spider web in my back, which was not a big deal, aside from the fact that it was summertime and my daughter was 7, and until that healed, when we went to the pool, I had to wear a t-shirt because I didn't want to have to try to explain to my 7-year-old why I had all this cut up shit in my back. So it's that kind of thing. You don't renegotiate during a scene, but does that mean you're not going to? Yeah, you're going to do it. So I talked about the fact that, negotiation we're not perfect at it. The one thing, so you need to use your safe words. When I talked about the fact that I'm not necessarily an SSC place, I'm not necessarily a rack place, I'm a responsibility location. And when I said that means I expect you to negotiate, I do. I also expect you to use your safe words. I just don't have a lot of sympathy for people who don't use their safe words. And then later say something like, well, the dominant should have known. No, I'll tell you right now, dominants are not mind readers, and they get into what they're doing just as much as what you're getting into as it's being done to you. They're having their own set of fun. And they don't know when you've had enough, unless they really know you. They don't know until you call a safe word. So you really need to use your safe words. You must communicate. I usually have a couple of dungeon monitors walking around the dungeon. They'll either have a red vest on or a red t-shirt that says DM on the back. If you're new and you're scening, either you're scening for the first time or you're scening for the first time with somebody that you've never played with before or that sort of stuff, by all means, you can ask one of my DMs to sort of keep an eye on the scene so that they can listen for safe words. If you happen to be a new top or a new dominant, I strongly suggest, or if you're playing with somebody new, check in with them often. Because I can tell you, I had a girl who attended, and went through an orientation, and she, after a few weeks, she negotiated a flogging scene with somebody, and the next week, she sent me a message saying, next time you train your dungeon monitors, make sure to tell them that if the bottom or submissive looks like they're in anguish, they shouldn't hesitate to stop the scene immediately. No! That I can tell you, when I scene, I probably look like I'm in anguish to a lot of people, but if one of my DMs tried to stop the scene, if it's a guy, I'd rip his nuts off and shove him up his nose, or kick him in the crotch. No, you don't. My DMs are not supposed to be interrupting scenes. It is not them who determine when a scene is over. It is strictly between the players. Remember, it's a responsibility to play in my dungeon, that you're going to be an adult. That includes negotiating and figuring out when you're done. They will stop a scene if a safe word is not being respected. But you need to use the safe word. And it's not always easy. I had a young lady, the young woman who had the flogging scene, she sent me this whole thing. And I said to her, I said, well, did you use a safe word when you were playing with him? And she said, no. And I was like, why not? And she said, well, I was embarrassed. I didn't want to embarrass him. I didn't want him to not want to play with me anymore. And these are not valid excuses for not calling a safe word. She said that he checked in. And she told him it was getting a little extreme, it was getting a little intense. And I said, well, what did he do? She says, well, he backed down a little bit, but then he ramped back up again. That's what they're doing. He's trying to build your adrenalines and your endorphins. Remember I was talking about the whole masochist thing. That's what they're trying to do. So she didn't call a safe word. She didn't get hurt. She just didn't really have a good time. And the poor dominant that she was playing with had no clue. And that's not fair. I had another young lady who came to the club many years ago, and she became a very heavy bottom quickly, and she loved being spanked and paddled on her butt. But she would get to a point where the dominant would check in and say, how you doing? And she would just start going, more, 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 which are magic words to most dominants and some tops and this sort of stuff. They love to hear the word more. Oh yeah, I can dish out more. The problem is, by the time she got to the point she was saying, oh, more, more, she was so far into subspace that she was not even capable of calling a safe word. And she was having her ass beat so badly that she couldn't go to work on Monday because she couldn't sit down at her desk. So she was having to buy one of those, inflatable rings to sit on, or she was having to call in and, that sort of thing. So it got to a point where she was having to have anybody she was going to play with talk to me or my master. We kind of slapped collars of protection on her. And we had to explain to anybody she was going to play with that the minute she says more, that equaled red. And they need to stop. Because, she just would get to a point where it would just be too much for her. She wouldn't pass out like I would. She would, just get to a point where it would be, like I talked about the fact you still have to have your job, you got to pay your bills, you got to do all of that sort of stuff. So you can't have your BDSM activities interfering with those things that we have to do as adults to be part of society. So safe words are important. They're necessary. Open and honest communication in negotiations is mandatory. And even though you may do this to the best of your abilities, you are still probably going to get hurt somewhere down the road. And when that happens, you need to take it as a lesson and learn not to do that again. You need to, use that as a lesson point. Don't beat yourself up over it, because we're humans. We make mistakes. But keep in mind, too, that tops and dominants make mistakes, too. Especially when they're learning and they're new. So you really have to take your time getting into all of this. Use your safe words and negotiate and communicate, because the reality is if you don't communicate when something's going wrong, the other person's going to keep doing stuff. And the bottom reality is, it doesn't matter whether you're vanilla or whether you're in BDSM or whatever type of, every single relationship, if it's to survive, has to have open and honest communication between the individuals, because everybody has wants and needs and desires within a relationship. And when those wants, needs, and desires are not being met anymore, the relationship is going to fail. So you really have to be good at communicating and doing that. And it's better to set times to do these negotiations. You set a time weeks in advance to go over a contract renegotiation with your master. You don't start conversations like this in a public restaurant, out of the blue. You don't start it in the car on the way to the dungeon to play for the night. You don't start it in the car on the way to somebody's wedding, because that can really fuck up somebody's wedding. So you really need to set time to negotiate and to discuss and to communicate. And when you're at the dungeon, if you're at the sanctuary and you're new and you're going to negotiate with somebody, if you want help with those negotiations, ask a staff person, ask the house manager, ask the host, ask a DM. We are more than happy to help in the negotiation process, to let people work this out, so we can, say a couple things that you need to always include in negotiations that a lot of people don't think about is you need to include some health concerns. Okay, you need to let somebody know if you're diabetic. Okay, you need to let somebody know if you've had back surgery, if you're epileptic, if there are any of these concerns that you have. The person that you're playing with needs to know, both from the top and a bottom standpoint, but especially if you're a bottom, you need to be honest about what health concerns you might have with that person. And when you get a little further in, you have got to negotiate sexual contact. Must negotiate sexual contact. Because the reality is, let's say you've got a female submissive and a male dominant, and they don't necessarily negotiate sex or that sort of thing, and during the course of play or whatever, he reaches and grabs her private area, her pussy or whatever, and she's like, oh, no, you can't touch there, and he hears, oh, no, you can't touch there, but that's not a red or a yellow even, or whatever. You have to negotiate what is allowable and not allowable. And the reality is there are people out there that don't negotiate that, and male dominance or just dominance in general may say that, well, if they didn't say no, then that means yes. And no, that's not the case. I hate to tell you. Yes has to be, all sexual stuff has to be done beforehand. And that sort of thing. In as far as the submissives, you might think, oh, well, that's obviously, a no-brainer, but it's not. I had somebody a couple of years ago send me a message saying, is it okay for me to require all potential play partners to provide me with written STD test results so that I know? And I said, well, of course. And I said, and if they don't want to provide them, then you have the option of not playing with them. But in further conversation with them, the reason they were asking this is because they were going to go play with somebody they'd never met. They were going to go play at this person's house, and they were hoping that it turned into a rape scene. So they were not negotiating sex, but they were hoping that it was going to happen. Trust me, you can negotiate rape scenes without making it real rape. Because the problem is what you're then doing is you're teaching a dominant or a top or whatever that, yeah, all submissives want to be raped, because unfortunately that is a misconception that a lot of dominants have. And if you're watching this video and that's a misconception you have, you're wrong, okay? No, that's definitely something that needs to be negotiated. It must be consent. However, if you don't negotiate it and you happen to be a submissive or a bottom or something like that, you don't negotiate it, and something sexual happens, you need to call a safe word right then and there, even if it's red, to say, oh my God, whatever. It's going to happen. I even have, I have a carving on my back that was done by a national presenter, actually, who was kind of visiting the club, and we kind of did that, and that sort of morphed into something else, and then it morphed into a fisting, which I was very thrilled with. I loved this whole thing, and this presenter stopped in the middle, fist in pussy, and leaned down and said, I just realized we did not negotiate this. Would you like me to stop? And I was like, oh, fuck no. So that's me, because to me, I like sex involved with my kink. But that was a situation with someone who's even a presenter with somebody else. So these things really, although I think if she had tried to fist me and I didn't want her to, I would have told her beforehand. So negotiations is important. Using your safe words is important. Being open and honest in your communications is important, but also recognizing that you're going to fail at this at least once. You're going to fuck it up. So try not to be too hard on yourself or the other people when that happens. Communication is key. So the only other thing that I'm going to go a little bit into, I guess, subspace. So we talked about the fact that people go into what we call subspace. Tops also, or dominants, can also go into kind of this heady space because their adrenalines are going to get pumping and that sort of stuff during a scene. When a scene is over, very often somebody needs what's called aftercare. And that is when the scene is over, they need a little bit of time to adjust and come back to reality, shall we say. And that can be being wrapped in a blanket, cuddled on the couch. We always have M&Ms and some peanut bars for a quick dose of sugar, or if you need some protein. We always have that kind of stuff there. We've always got water in the dungeon if you need it, that kind of thing. So, sometimes there needs to be kind of a decompression time afterwards. And something that is very common is what we call sub drop or even top drop. And that is, you will play at the dungeon and you have this huge rush of adrenaline and endorphins and all of this other stuff. And it gives you that kind of high. It gives you that altered state of consciousness, shall we say. And it's going to subside, while you're at the club and stuff. However, once the pendulum is swung up that high, it's going to swing back the other way. And it is very normal for people who have had this, experience to at some point later, and it could be 12 hours, 24 hours, 30, a couple days later, that we experience sub drop or top drop. And what that feels like is it can be a state of depression or something. Or for some people, it can be a whole realization of, oh my God, I got naked in a dungeon and I did this and I did that. What the fuck was I thinking? Oh my God, this is normal. It's a normal response and reaction. Dark chocolate works great. Really good quality dark chocolate, because it kind of gives you an adrenaline or endorphin boost or something like that. So I used to always keep really good quality dark chocolate candy bars in my sock drawer just for sub drop. But know that this is a normal process, that you might feel down or depressed or something after having a big scene or that sort of stuff. Tops, dominance. It's a really good idea when you're playing with somebody, even if you've just met somebody, to get their contact information and check in on them 24 hours, 48 hours later. Because what may have been great the night of the scene might not be so great 48 hours later. Like the woman who discovered she would love to be spanked and paddled may have been great on Saturday night, but if the top checks in with her on Monday or Tuesday, she'd say, okay, so we went a little heavy duty there with the paddle because I couldn't go to work today, so maybe we need to drop it back a little bit. So, and it's after a scene should have conversation as well. Before a scene, during a scene, after a scene, there needs to be kind of a post-scene discussion. So the dropping is a normal occurrence. And if you need to talk to somebody, sometimes you just need to talk to somebody. You can always send a message to me. sanctuaryloveslave@gmail is my email address. or on FetLife, Love Slave on FetLife. Also on FetLife, Denver Sanctuary has its own profile. If you ever need somebody to talk to or have some questions about anything, you can always contact them. We have a dominance discussion group. We have a submissives discussion group at the Sanctuary. You don't have to be a member to go to either of those groups. We have a switches group as well. You can go meet other people and create a network. You can create, you can talk to other people, especially if you're new. It's great to go talk to other submissives or talk to other dominants and get some mentoring and some pointers and some tips. And you go to the submissives group and they'll give you plenty of ideas and advice on how to deal with subdrop, or things or to have, somebody that you can use as somebody to call and talk to if you don't necessarily want to talk to the person that you played with, kind of thing. So it's a great resource to use so that you can become acclimated to the community. I know I cover etiquette in one of the other videos, but it's kind of important, so I'm just going to do real quick etiquette again here. When you're at the club, you don't touch what doesn't belong to you. Again, we talked about consent, so you don't touch other people's things. You don't touch other people, period. You just try not to touch anybody else. Sometimes it's crowded and you have to walk by somebody. If you need to touch somebody's shoulder, say excuse me, be polite about it. Don't interfere with scenes. I talk about the fact that you really need to be able to focus 100% on the scene, which means if you're in the dungeon and you're watching a scene, don't get too close to the scene. Do not attempt to have conversations or converse with the people that are playing. Don't try to ask the dominant where he bought the wonderful set of floggers he's using is. If there's somebody sitting on a table and somebody's putting 50 needles in their back, you don't get in front of them in their face and say, oh my God, does that hurt? Or you should see it, it's really pretty. Don't do that. You are interfering with other people who are playing. You're interfering with them getting into their own headspace. So don't interfere with scenes. Really, honestly, you can watch in the dungeon. Conversations, just social conversations, need to be up in the front social rooms. I have 2 front social rooms. Move up there. If you're just sitting and chatting and the chatting gets loud, the DMs are going to ask you to leave the dungeon so that you're not interfering. The main dungeon needs to be scene space, and it needs to be where people can focus. So please don't interrupt scenes. Obviously, you might see things that people are doing and you don't understand what they're doing. Ask questions. Ask a staff person, or whatever, and or wait until somebody's scene is over, but wait until they're even done with aftercare, and then you can ask somebody about a toy they were using or a scene or something like that. And remember that privacy is very important. Anything that happens at the dungeon, at the sanctuary, stays at the sanctuary. Okay. If you see a coworker at the club, that doesn't mean that the next time you're at work you can start talking about kinky shit in the break room. Don't. Just keep everything as personal or private as possible. Respect everybody else's privacy to do what they want to do in the club, and not have to worry about anybody else getting into their shit, because it's nobody else's business. And that sort of stuff. So you run into somebody at King Supers in the produce department that you know from the club. They could be with friends, family, coworkers. Best to ignore them, because you don't want to have them explain who you are, especially if you go up and say something like, man, that was a hot fucking scene. Where'd you get those floggers? The grocer may look at them kind of strange from that point on. So just be really respectful of other people. So this is the end of the 3rd video. Oh, hi, Yappy. You came back. Thank you. This is the end of the 3rd video. There are 3 videos. There's one that's just kind of 101. There's one about the club rules, and there's one about the history of the kink community. You need to watch all 3 from start to finish. You can then go to the club to any play party, not any of the meetings or discussions, but any play party, and then when you get to the door, tell them that you have seen the videos and you want to take the membership test. It's 25 questions. It is multiple choice. But you really have to have watched the videos to pass the test. Doesn't matter whether you've maybe been kinky for 20 years. You're not going to know my club rules. You're not going to know the history of the kink community. And we ask very specific questions to that kind of thing. So you can show up and you take it. Annual membership fee right now is $20 a year. The play parties are anywhere from $15 to $25 a night. And like I said, it's an annual membership fee, so you have to renew the membership once it expires. And if you need location information, because I do not have that on the website, my phone number is on the website. You send a text message to the number on the website saying I have watched the 3 videos and I want to attend this particular play party to get my membership, and I will text the information back to you. I do that for privacy concerns, to protect my club, and to protect my membership. So that said, I guess I will now converse with my cat about world domination after I turn the video camera off.